Hello everyone and welcome to the Climate Ambassador podcast series. My name is EucA and I'm a project manager of the European University College Association. Climate Ambassadors is an European Plus project that aims to reinforce climate education and civic engagement by helping young people to better understand climate-related risks and become active contributors to the more resilient communities. As part of the project, we analyze real climate disaster case studies in Belgium. One of these focused on the urban flooding that affected the Place Falager area in Brussels during extreme rainfall events in July 2021. Brussels had already invested in flood prevention measures. The intensity of the rainfall overwhelmed the existing system. Streets and underground spaces were flooded. Mobility was disrupted and local businesses had temporarily suspended their activities. This case reminds us that climate resilience is not only about responding to disasters, but also about understanding risks and preparing our community for a changing climate. To help us better understand these challenges, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Isabel Scheckenbach, Head of Climate Program at CESP. Welcome to this podcast.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. My name is Isabel Scheckenbach. I'm the head of the climate program at the Center for European Policy Studies, CESP, which is an independent think tank here in Brussels. And my team and I, we aim to shape the political debate on climate and biodiversity with our independent research. My background is actually a little bit unconventional for that role. I have a PhD in finance and I worked in the German automotive industry for quite some time. And then I worked for several years as a sustainability consultant for PwC in Germany and in Denmark. In that role, I supported companies across different sectors in analyzing and managing their climate and nature-related risks, and then especially in developing strategies that would reduce their impact on the environment, but also enhance the resilience of their business. In the last year, I've actually been traveling the world. I've doing a lot of voluntary work in the Amazon and reforestation projects. And I've been truly blown away by the nature of, or the beauty of our planet and the nature on all of my hikes. And it has just reminded me time and again why I love doing this kind of job and working in the field of climate change and sustainability, because I think we have such a beautiful planet to protect. And I'm curious for the questions that you're going to have for me today.
So thank you for sharing this globally, also the questions that are related to Europe, but also would like to have also your opinion about the biggest picture, not globally. So the first question that we have for you is, how does climate change influence flooding and other extreme events in Europe, but also globally?
Yeah. Let me start with something that might surprise you. You probably have seen the devastating floods in Valencia in 2024, the wildfires in Greece and Los Angeles, or the Ahr Valley flooding in Germany in 2021. And these events are not coincidences. They are all connected, and climate science actually shows us why and how. And as you can imagine, as global temperatures continue to rise due to the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the air around us holds more and more moisture. And this means that rainfall becomes more intense and more concentrated, rivers overflow faster, and coastal areas face stronger storm surges. At the same time, higher temperatures also dry out landscapes more quickly, which is why we're also seeing more intense wildfires speeding across regions that were not used to them. Scientists call these events climate hazards, and what the data is telling us is that in Europe and globally, these events are happening way more often than they used to. They're more severe, and they are affecting areas that simply have not seen them before. This is not something that's coming in the future. We can already see it happening around us all the time. And the consequences for people are actually really serious. Many lose their homes, they lose access to clean drinking water for weeks, and often face huge financial losses. Most of the times because flood insurance in the area simply doesn't exist, or they don't have the money to actually have those insurances. And rebuilding those homes and communities takes years, not only weeks. But what I think is really important to say as well is this is not like a story without hope. We know from a scientific perspective which technologies and measures help us to adapt to these events in a better way than what we are doing right now. And at the same time, the science is also clear. The faster our governments and businesses act on actually reducing emissions, the less severe these hazards will become for all of us. And that is exactly where our collective voice as citizens matter.
Thank you for your answer. And you're mentioning now finishing collective voices, no? And how this is important also to connect and to stand and to also to bring these topics to the top of the global agenda and the political agenda, not only.
Definitely,
to keep this. And we work as EucA with young people and a lot with students. So I would like to ask your opinion and also why for you it's important that young people learn about climate change and also which action they can take to fight.
Yeah, that's a very good question indeed. So there's a line from I think it was the UN Climate Summit in 2014 that has stuck with me since then. And there was like a very famous president who said it. He said, "We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and we are the last ones who can actually do anything about it." And I think that's exactly where climate resilience comes into place, especially for the younger generation or the people that are a little bit younger than me, because climate hazards are kind of becoming the new normal. Climate change is a long-term challenge for all of us. It's unfortunately more a marathon than a sprint. So building resilience means developing real transferable skills. It means, for example, learning to interpret climate risk data, to understand how you can organize your communities around shared vulnerabilities, or thinking critically about how we design the spaces in which we live in. And those analytical and collaborative capabilities are actually also capabilities that will serve you far beyond climate resilience. When the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, climate adaptation was actually for the first time placed on equal footing with climate mitigation. So the global leaders recognized that resilience requires a systemic change in our society and on a global level, and that we need to redesign our cities in order to protect communities. I lived in Copenhagen for some time, as mentioned before, and I think it's a city that has demonstrated quite well how you can actually become more climate resilient. They had a real catastrophic flooding in 2011, which cost like billions of dollars in damage. So as a consequence of that, the city came together and they reimagined how to manage the water. So they redesigned streets, parks, but also roofs in order to absorb the rainfall rather than to fight the rainfall. And what really inspires me about that project is that it was politicians, it was public agencies, architects, economists, local citizens, all working together. And by this kind of innovative or like not very typical cooperation across different kind of organizations and communities, they created really innovative concepts. And on top of that, the investments that they made in green and blue infrastructure delivered really significant returns, and not only financial returns, but also in terms of health of the citizens, of like improved quality of life, and of course avoided flood damage. So I think that's actually a really cool project to show the different aspects of profits and collaboration if you're tackling or if you're looking into climate resilience. And in general, the field of climate resilience is still very young. Some research are already working on solutions, but I think there's a lot of space for all of our listeners to come up with like creative and cool ideas and bring them on the table or start their own businesses. So I would invite you to be creative, think about how we can design the future together and make it more climate resilient and enjoy this livable planet together.
A typical solution, no? And also like think outside the box to find. I will take this as
and you can even do that on a like small level. It doesn't always have to be like a big scale project. You can do it in your village or maybe just on your like house or with your neighbors. Sometimes that's already enough, and then maybe you inspire other people and they will follow.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for sharing this insight and expertise with us today. The experience globally in the world, in Europe, as you mentioned, the Dana event in Valencia, but also we have experience here in Belgium in 2021 with the flood, the disaster that also affect Belgium. There are example now of also how climate change and how climate disaster can affect a community, a big city, and the infrastructure. So even also if our city can be more vulnerable, we should be more aware, and also our younger generation, they should be more aware about also what all of this involves and also brings in terms of responsiveness, and also in terms of public also accountability, and also about also investment and sustainability finance that will affect. So I don't know if you want to say something to close.
Thanks for having me. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that you keep engaged and you don't lose hope. I think there's still so much that we can all do together.
Perfect. Thank you so much for listening to the Climate Ambassador podcast series. We hope that this conversation has encouraged you to learn more about climate risk and join the effort to build stronger and more resilient community. Thank you so much.